Hey there, join me while we make some CopyCat pasta da Vinci from the Cheesecake Factory. I did kind of an aerial view this time so you can see what I'm doing and how I'm making it, but basically you're going to need two pots, one pot for the pasta and one more of a skillet to create the sauce and the chicken. Normally you would go ahead and saute the chicken and the mushrooms first. However, I am using a rotisserie chicken and I do not do the mushrooms. So we're going to kind of skip those first two steps and go right into making the sauce. So you're going to take 2 tablespoons of garlic along with some butter and basically just saute that. You'll see I kind of fast forward through some of it here so you don't have to sit and watch how boring it is. But basically you're going to brown the butter and saute the garlic together. And once those are combined and there's not a whole lot of juice, they look like they're crisping up, you're going to want to add in 1 purple onion. And this I chopped finely, but not like super small. I like it kind of chunky, but not big old bites. It's going to soften pretty much to a caramelized state. So if you're like me and you don't like raw onions, a little bit bigger chunks of onions is not going to be bad. So at this point, I'm just letting the onions and the garlic and the butter all saute together. You want your heat kind of at a medium, but you want to stir it frequently because you do not want them to burn. If it burns, then that's going to overpower the whole flavor in your dish. So make sure you're keeping an eye on it. You want it to saute. So like I said, I use a medium heat. At this point, I'm going to pull off the rotisserie chicken off the bone. Like I said, I'm being lazy and I didn't want to cook the chicken, so I'm just using the pre-cooked rotisserie. So like I said, you're going to want to frequently check it, make sure it's not burning. So here I can see that it's starting to soften. They're caramelizing a little bit. So this is perfect. This is exactly what you want. You'll notice that the onions start to lighten in color, which again is right where you want to be. Then you're going to take 2 tablespoons of flour and just sprinkle it over the top of your onions. I sprinkled both tablespoons all over, and then I went back in and stirred it up, so you can see that here. You want the onions to be covered in the flour, so once you give them a good stir, basically what it's going to do is create a little crust on the onions, and it just gives it all that flavor. It locks it in really good. Go ahead and scrape the bottom of the pan. You don't want any of the flour left in the pan. You want it all sauteed around your onions and garlic. And then just let that simmer for a little bit. Again, turn down the heat if necessary because you do not want these onions to burn. You just want them to be warm and caramelized. As you can see, this is a process of love. You want to keep checking it. You definitely don't want it to burn. I've adjusted the heat a couple times to go between medium high and medium low. I'm getting up all that leftover kind of crunch of the flour. And then at this point, we're going to add in the marsala. It asks for a Madeira wine, but I can never seem to find the Madeira wine, so I use the marsala. You want to use a sweet dry. In the recipe, the original recipes that I found, a lot of them used just the dry, and then it had a very bitter kind of wine taste, which I did not like. So I've, like I said, used the marsala. It, at this point, clumps all the onions together and kind of makes them gooey, so I just kind of separate them out so that they can saute a little bit longer. And then I leave it for roughly 2 to 3 minutes, just kind of depending on how my onions are looking. You don't want them to be soggy. That's why the heat is so important, but you also don't want them to burn. So it's a fine line of checking them frequently and stirring them. And as you can see here, they are kind of clumping up. They're not gooey though. Yes, they're clumping, but not gooey. At this point, you're going to want to add in the beef broth. I did not have beef broth, so here I'm using chicken broth, which is okay, substitution. The only difference is your sauce is going to be different in color. The one from the Cheesecake Factory is a darker brown. Mine was a lighter kind of creamy color because I used the chicken instead of the beef broth. So at this point, just basically separate the onions so that they get all in that juice flavor, and make it to where it's not clumpy. And then you're going to let the heat simmer on this again to just lock in all that flavor from your chicken broth. Make sure that you're checking your noodles frequently and stirring those as well. At this point, I think mine are done, so I think you can see I take out one here to test and make sure. You want them to be al dente. You do not want them to be overcooked, because then as you mix all the sauce together, they'll cook a little bit more. So I go ahead and drain the noodles, keep a little bit of the juice to go on top of the noodles so that they don't stick. And then I just let them sit here while I finish up with the sauce. You can see through the lid of the pan the sauce is simmering, which is exactly what you want. I think I pointed out here in this video too, you want that low little boil, the simmer. You don't want a rolling boil, you don't want it too hot. You just want light bubbles throughout. That is absolutely perfect. At this point, you're going to add in the heavy cream. I put the bottle, and this is a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. I put it aside because depending on how this cooks up, I sometimes add in another 1/4 cup of cream. So then you're going to add in your Parmesan cheese. I used to use real Parmesan, but it would literally cluster up into a big gooey ball, and it was a mess. So now I use the grated Parmesan cheese. It still gives it the same flavor, and it doesn't clump up into a sticky ball. You want to stir it up good, make sure that it's all mixed up well so it's not clumpy. Again, let it simmer for a few minutes. I do add in some fresh mozzarella into it just for that flavor and the texture, but very little. This, if we're lucky, is a 1/4 cup left. Usually I just do like a handful, but the bag had roughly a 1/4 cup, so I just dumped it all in, because who's going to save a tablespoon of cheese? Nobody. But make sure, again, you stir it up. You don't want it to clump up. So give it a good stir, and then you're going to put the lid back on and let it simmer for roughly 2 to 3 minutes. I come back in, add some parsley to the top. At this point, it would be best to use fresh parsley for flavor, but I didn't have any, so I'm just using the dried parsley from our spice rack. And then as I stir it, I'm realizing that it's watery, and I don't like my sauce watery. I like it a little bit more creamy. So at this point, I'm going to add in another 1/4 cup of the heavy whipping cream and stir it all around. You can do, whatever is to your liking. If you like it a little bit more watery, that's totally fine. If you don't, do like I did and add in a 1/4 cup. My only suggestion with this is to go slow. If you add it in too fast, it's going to be really thick. So just add in small increments, stir it, let it simmer, add in small increments, let it simmer. Make sure you're mixing it up really good. All right, so now we're going to add in my case, the rotisserie chicken. If you cooked the raw chicken and the mushrooms, you would grab your plate that you set aside of those items and add those back in as well. Like I said, I don't do the mushrooms, and I cheated and used rotisserie chicken. So either way, whether you did the same method as me or you cooked the chicken, you're going to go ahead and add that in now. You're going to want to make sure that the chicken is fully covered in the sauce. In my case, the chicken's already cooked, so I'm really just warming it. But if you cook the raw chicken, you're going to want to make sure that it's cooked thoroughly all the way through. So I put the lid back on, and I let it sit for roughly 3 minutes. As you can see, I'm holding up a 3. It sits roughly 3 minutes just to saute and make sure that that chicken is nice and warm and all the flavors lock in together. And then that's pretty much it. You're going to put the noodles on a plate and put the sauce on top. The recipe calls for you mixing it all together. I, however, don't do that because I portion it out into separate meals and freeze it. So I keep it separate and put the sauce on top once I freeze it. But you can do it however you want. If you like to mix it all together, at this point you can go ahead and mix it. But like I said, I keep it separate. So I'm going to put the noodles on my plate, put the sauce on top, and then I sprinkle some fresh Parmesan over the top just for that last kind of garnish. And you can also add some fresh parsley on the top if you wish. But that's pretty much it. It's super simple. It takes roughly an hour altogether with all the increments of, letting it simmer, and cutting everything up. So it's a really easy meal, delicious, warm, hearty pasta dish. And this is as close as I've got to the Cheesecake Factory dish. And I've tried quite a few recipes. So enjoy. Bye for now.